Hello, my fellow Inklings, and welcome back to the Eagle and Child, the meeting place of the Inklings, people like C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien and others. So let me ask you a question that I think matters more than almost anything else in the Christian life. What is your image of God? What is his character? Is God like Zeus up in the clouds, gripping lightning bolts, watching you closely, tense with anger, just waiting for you to make the wrong move? Or is God more like the Father in one of Jesus' most beloved stories? The one who sees his wayward son coming from a long way off and actually runs out to meet him, embraces him and kisses him before the son can even get a word out of apology. Those are two very different stories of God. And the one you carry in your heart will shape everything. How you see the world, how you see yourself, whether you feel welcomed by God or watched with suspicion. I want to start this journey with a topic that a lot of Christians find very uncomfortable: hell. Not because I want to be sensational about it, but because nothing shaped my early faith more powerfully or more fearfully than the belief that God might torture me for an eternity if I didn't believe the right things in this lifetime. My fear-based information started early. I remember sitting in front of our black and white TV as a 10-year-old boy. Billy Graham was on. And then he came, the moment I now call the Billy Graham invitation moment. It felt like he was speaking directly to me when he said, "If you died tonight, do you know where you would spend eternity?" My parents believed the Reverend Billy Graham and what he said, so I believed it too. And I tried not to question it. That question never really left me. And I had an anxiety over me, felt like a cloud, for really most of my life. But this question settled quietly into the background of my life and stayed there for decades. When doubts crept in, and they did, I would wonder, did I really believe enough? And then I would push that doubt back down because the stakes felt too high to examine them honestly. The message was unmistakable. You must be ready right now, because death is the end of the story. After that, your eternal fate is fixed and final. And everyone I heard preach this message spoke about it with total certainty, as if they had a backstage pass to the afterlife. But nobody ever told me where exactly this idea came from. Nobody told me whether it was what the earliest Christians believed. I assumed it was. Nobody showed me the specific verse in the scripture that clearly says death is the final deadline. It didn't matter. A great man taught it. My parents in church believed it, so I tried not to question it. Now let's fast forward 40 years. My eldest son sat across from me at a restaurant. He was an adult now, and he told me he had become an atheist. He couldn't believe in the God he had been taught to believe in. He said he could not worship a God who would forever torture someone, even good people, simply for not believing the right things before they died, and without any redemptive hope. And then he said something that I have never forgotten. "Dad, if that's who God is, then you would be a better father than God. Because I know you would never torture me forever, even if I rejected you. Would you?" I immediately told him, "Well, of course not, son." But I was shocked. And quietly, I wondered whether my son was headed for hell. I asked him to walk with me through his journey, how he got there. At first, he didn't want to. He wasn't there to debate theology. He just wanted to be honest with his father. But I pressed him, probably because I was hoping I could reason him back into the faith. Eventually, he agreed, but on two conditions. One, that I wouldn't check my brain at the door, and two, that I would be willing to change if my heart and my research led me to change. That second condition terrified me. The verse about blasphemy and the unforgivable sin was ringing in my head, but I knew I had no choice. My love for my son turned out to be bigger than my theology, I realized. I should tell you a little bit about where I came from. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist fundamentalist preacher in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. My father studied at Southwestern Theological Seminary. My uncle was one of the original translators of the NIV Bible. Faith in my family was about believing the right things, following the right rules, and inerrant scripture. If you broke the rules, A Zeus-like God would punish you. If you stayed on the narrow path, you would be rewarded. It was a reward-punishment faith. Here's something I have to confess. As a Protestant, I never seriously studied church history before Martin Luther. I did not know where or when or why certain beliefs like original sin, penal substitutionary atonement, and the traditional view of hell had developed in the first place. Those were ideas that Luther had inherited and carried with him. But where did they come from? And had Christians always believed them? My son's request seemed reasonable, so I started to look. Over the next season, my son and I met regularly over a beer and a burger. We shared our questions, our doubts, and our research. We shared our hearts. I approached it the way I approach anything as a trained lawyer. Examine the text, examine the assumptions, follow the evidence. And here's what I can honestly tell you now. Gratefully and honestly, my son and I found common ground. We both consider ourselves passionate Christians who love Jesus today. But some of the narratives we had been handed did not line up with Scripture. They did not line up with what the earliest Christians believed. And they certainly did not line up with the love we sense in our hearts when we actually read the Gospels and what Jesus himself said. There was no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We just needed to recover Christianity, one rooted in love and not fear. That is what recovered Christianity is all about. C.S. Lewis, who's not exactly a radical theologian, once wrote something that has stayed with me. He said that we are not merely tolerated by God. We're invited to become reflections of the divine love. He called him little Christ. That's the truest thing about us, not condemnation, but connection. That resonates deeply with me. And I think it resonates with a lot of people who have quietly drifted away from the faith they grew up with. Not because they hate Jesus, because they were told that following Jesus meant believing that almost everyone else will be eternally tortured. This space is not for debate. It is not for people who are completely settled in their theology and want to defend it. It is for people who are asking honest questions, people who are curious, people who want a safe place to wonder out loud without being talked down to or corrected with Bible verses by people with absolute certitude of their faith. And I want to be clear, I do not have a backstage pass to the afterlife either. None of us do. God is still very much a mystery to me. I don't know that I am right. I just know that the journey has been worth it. And I found much more peace once I believed God is not an eternal torturer or punitive God of wrath. So let me leave you with the question that started all this for me. Where's the Billy Graham narrative in Scripture? Where does the Bible clearly say that death is the final deadline? Where does it say that a loving God would torture people forever for finite failures in a finite life? This is where we're going to start, because the image of God you carry may truly be the most important question you ever ask yourself. Many attribute to Albert Einstein the quote, "The most important question you can ever ask is the universe friendly?" I agree. We're going to explore that very question. I'm glad you are here. Grace and peace.